Welcome back to Haunted and Historic Australia for another episode in our Ghost series. In this episode, we take a look at the St Kilda Ouija spirit.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Idle hands are the devil's playthings." This may well have applied to 6 young entertainers staying at the George Hotel in St Kilda in the year of 1966. These 6 young lads were visiting Melbourne from interstate, and one evening, according to the lead guitarist, John Green, we cobbled together a Ouija board using George Hotel stationery. 4 of them, singers, Jeff St John and Marty Roan, and 2 members of Marty's backing group, the Soul Agents, Barry Kelly and John Green.
I'm still mad at you for doing all the things that you shouldn't do. No way, child, with just one plan. You're out to get all you can. I'm still mad at you. I'm still mad at you. I'm still mad at you.
Sat round a table in the main lounge of their run-down suite of rooms and conducted a seance. The Soul Agent's drummer, Roger Felice, chose not to take part. He preferred to remain seated on the nearby couch, chatting with a young lady he'd met that day. The other lads agreed Marty should jot down the indicated letters. Each placed their outstretched forefinger on the upturned glass in the middle of the table. "Relax and don't push the glass," Marty advised. "You ask a question, Jeff," someone suggested. And straight off, Jeff asked, "Is there anyone here?" Slowly, as if by magic, or the focused power of several minds, the glass moved rapidly across the table and come to rest on the word yes. All 4 boys glanced at each other suspiciously. Who was moving the glass? Jeff cleared his throat nervously and said, "Do you have a message for us?" The glass started to again move. This time it slid slowly, touching the edge of the alphabetical letters as Barry called them out, making sure Marty didn't miss writing any down. H, V, D. Then it stopped. "What the does this mean?" John asked patiently. "There's no such word. This is nonsense. I think I'll go and..." John was halfway out of his chair when the glass slowly resumed its slow movement. U, N, D, R. "None of it makes sense," Marty spoke up. "Ask her who's sending this message," Marty moaned, looking at the others, hoping they might have made some sense of the message, but they hadn't. Noting the forefingers still resting on the glass edge, Jeff St John seized the initiative again. "Tell me again, who is this message from?" he asked impatiently. This time the glass moved swiftly through the letters of G, E, L, D, A again and stopped. "Gelda." "Gelda?" Jeff repeated. "Is it a woman's name, Gelda? I don't know any Gelda." "Me neither," John shrugged, looking at Marty, who simply shook his head. Barry Kelly paused, thinking before admitting, "Neither do I. No, I don't know any Gelda." The girl, quietly chatting with Roger, instantly stopped talking before breaking into loud hysterical shrieks and hurriedly leaving the room in tears. Roger followed her into the dormitory bedroom, intending to offer her comfort, but also anxious to find out what was causing her such distress. What he learned and told his mates was astounding. Firstly, Roger's new friend was Dutch, having grown up in the Netherlands before migrating to Australia. The spirit they had contacted with was one of her long-lost childhood friend, Gelda, with whom she had been skating on a frozen river. The friend had fallen through thin ice and was taken by the current. The body was never recovered. She tearfully explained that magnetic power cables under the frozen river had probably served to pull her friend down when the ice broke. In other words, they heaved, letters HVD, her under, letters UNDR, which were previously spelt out by the Ouija board. Suddenly the message made sense. Seeking further verification that they had contacted a genuine otherworldly spirit, they then placed their forefingers back on the upturned glass and asked for a final question. Where did this happen? The glass slowly moved around the board and spelled out HOLLAND. Totally spooked, the boys tossed their temporary Ouija board out. They'd had enough of dabbling with the spirit world, or the spirit world dabbling with them. At least they hoped so. But it was not to be. Their frivolous antics may have awakened a more sinister force. Essentially, there were two pop groups staying at the George at the time, both booked in by their manager Nat Kipner of Spin Records in Sydney. Jeff St. John and his packing group, the ID.
I'm gonna be a big time operator. Don't know what I'm gonna do now.
Had rooms in the main part of the hotel, while Marty Roan and his backing group, the Soul Agents of John Green, Roger Felice, Barry Kelly and Gary Dean, had far less salubrious accommodation. Although accessed by the George's main staircase and elevator, their suite was actually located in an older 3-story annex next to the main hotel. It consisted of one small bedroom with 2 tightly squeezed single beds in a rear-facing window, plus a large dormitory with 3 or 4 single beds, bathroom, and a very large lounge with sliding doors accessing a balcony which overlooked Fitzroy Street. Stairs outside their door led up to a securely locked room, but no other guest occupied this part of the George. With peeling paint and faded carpets, it looked as if there hadn't been any guests there in the past decade. In fact, the building was earmarked for future demolition. After the Ouija board scare, strange incidents began to occur. The first of these happened late one night when, after a gig, Marty entered the elevator in the hotel's ground floor reception area. He was alone, yet as he stepped inside and before he had a chance to press the button, he distinctly heard a voice, a very matter-of-fact, disembodied voice, say, "Take it up, Joe." He exited promptly, determined to take the stairs from then on. Marty later convinced himself that it was simply his imagination, but an incident the following day made him think twice. "Hey fellas, come and have a look at this," he called. Marty, Barry and Roger had been lounging on the beds in the dormitory bedroom as a Beatles LP was playing in the adjoining lounge. When the music stopped, Marty went in to flip over the record. That's when he called the boys in. "Come on, quick," he urged the others. "You got to see this." Barry and Roger appeared in the lounge and Marty excitedly pointed out what he was so excited about. The needle hadn't returned to the rest position when it was finished playing the first side. Instead, it moved back to the 4th track and was playing it again, silently. "Oh God," Marty whispered. "Look at the name of the track. Don't Bother Me." Instantly each thought of the seance and looked at one another in amazement, minds racing. Then followed a string of startled profanities, the equivalent of "blow me down, stone the crows, and I'll be damned," and substitute that for more colourful words of your own choice. Marty swore that he hadn't touched the arm or the player, which, knowing Marty, everyone accepted without question. Was it a further message from the other side? Were they being told to stop fooling with the occult? Was it just a coincidence, a freak accident, an electrical failure? Or was it a fair dinkum straight-up warning? The next unexpected incident related to the room upstairs. the unoccupied, securely locked room. Despite the fact that they knew the upstairs room was always locked, the lads often heard footsteps up there, particularly late at night, a time when the mind plays tricks on people who are trying to sleep. Barry had heard those noises, so had Jerry. Marty had heard them too, but he dismissed any thought of them being supernatural. He knew there had to be a logical explanation for the footsteps. "They're cleaners," he insisted. One afternoon he heard someone on the stairs and a jiggling of keys. He quietly opened the door and looked up, trying to keep out of sight. A woman, presumably a cleaner, had her back to him, was trying various keys in the lock. He stood and watched as she found the right key, opened the squeaky door and disappeared inside. Then Marty bounded up the stairs to have a peek. This was his chance to prove that the room was nothing more than a cleaner's changing room, and the footsteps up there meant absolutely nothing. It was creepy, Marty later recalled. Big old wardrobes with 2 glass doors and tops like coffins were tilted back against the wall. Broken cupboards and side tables with missing drawers or broken legs stood drunkenly covered in dust for decades. Framed mirrors with their glass cracked or half missing, spider webs thick with age hanging all over them. It was the George's furniture graveyard. Some pieces were too good to throw out, but most had parts salvaged to keep other pieces in service. In its prime, the George had 169 rooms, the largest outside the city of Melbourne. Later, Marty told the others what he'd seen and declared that they had nothing to worry about. The footsteps were made by the cleaners as they tidied up. Everyone pretended to be relieved. Secretly, everyone wondered why cleaners would be tidying a furniture graveyard covered in cobwebs up at 3 a.m. However, the furniture graveyard hid more secrets than any of them had guessed. While in Melbourne, Marty celebrated his 18th birthday, and an impromptu party was arranged in the suite. The tale of the seance became the main discussion between drinks, and Marty followed with his spooky experience in the elevator and the weird self-selected Beatles track. One of the guests, a well-known radio DJ, was having none of it. Annoyed that they weren't believed, Roger mentioned the mysterious footsteps they'd all heard on their ceiling in the middle of the night. "Ah, rubbish," the DJ scoffed. "Come on then, upstairs. Let's have a look at this pesky ghost. The door's always locked, so you won't..." John began to explain, but a small group had already adjourned to the stairwell, most with drinks in hand. "Anything for a bit of fun." They stood or sat on the stairs, chatting and watching with amusement as the DJ stood on the landing, waiting for his audience to settle. "Let's go and meet this bloody ghost," he smirked. With a drink in one hand, he grabbed the doorknob with the other. Whack! An unseen hand slapped his wrist. He leapt back in horror and yelped loudly, eyes wide with shock. He stumbled down the stairs, grabbed his coat, and ran down the next flight of stairs, 2 at a time, through the lobby and out in the street, and he never returned to the George Hotel again. The biggest, scariest shock, though, was just days away. One weekend, the girlfriends of Jeff St. John and Jerry Dean had arrived from Sydney to spend a few days with their men. The couples were granted exclusive use of the small bedroom, as it provided some privacy. On the first night of their visit, the rest of the Soul agents went off to see Max Merritt and the Meteors, while Jeff and Jerry remained in the apartment with the girls. Roger remembers that when the group returned to the George, and even before they put the key in the door, it flew open. Jerry stood in the doorway looking distraught. He was upset and visibly shaking. His girlfriend was almost hysterical. "What the hell happened?" Roger asked as the others crowded round. "We saw a thing, a ghost in there." Jerry pointed towards a small bedroom. "It frightened the shite out of us. All of us." The couples had been in bed, chatting and drinking, when Jerry got up to refill a glass of wine from a bottle resting on the mantelpiece over the old fireplace. There was a mirror above the mantel which reflected the wardrobe mirror on the opposite wall behind him. As he filled the glass, Jerry glanced in the mirror and saw, standing immediately behind him, a misty green shadow outline of a human figure wearing a dark cape. Jerry yelled at his girlfriend not to look, but, of course, she did, and she immediately started screaming. Showing masterly self-control, Jerry didn't turn around. He walked backwards between the beds towards the light switch by the door, through the spot where the apparition stood. He said it felt cold and smelt musty as he moved through it. It evaporated on contact. As soon as he reached the door and switched the light on, all four of them scrambled into the main lounge room and put all the lights on. They sat there shivering, no one knowing what to say. Finally, Jerry decided to report the matter to the front desk. He dragged on a pair of trousers, grabbed a jacket, and opened the apartment door. That's when he was confronted by the rest of the Soul agents coming home from the concert. They all adjourned to the lounge room, chatting over the top of each other. Was it a real ghost, or were the mirrors playing tricks on them? No, at least two, and possibly three of them had seen the menacing figure. Is this for real? Roger asked Jerry. Look at it, Jerry replied sharply, indicating his girlfriend curled up under a rug, sitting on the sofa, sobbing. Do you think I'd do this as a trick? Was anyone game enough to go back in the bedroom? At the very least, they had to retrieve articles of clothing from the wardrobe. Besides, if they didn't sleep there overnight, they'd have to sleep on the lounge room floor. Roger Felice and Marty Roan stood to one side in whispered conversation. They reached a decision. They walked, a little apprehensively, back into the bedroom. The window was closed, and the cheap tattered curtains were drawn across it. The beds were in disarray, testimony to the rapid departure of the occupants. Whoever you are, Marty announced bravely, make yourself known. Both observed the sheer curtains ripple. The only window in the room was firmly closed. Then suddenly, terrifyingly, the wardrobe door flew wide open. Marty later recalled that he and Roger had to literally climb over each other in their haste to vacate the room. No one slept in there for the remainder of their stay. The following morning, Marty asked the desk manager if anything strange had ever happened in their apartment. Oh, do you mean the ghost? Was his calm response. He explained that a World War I sailor had either been murdered there or fell down the stairs and had broken his neck, and confessed that many had seen a green mist in that part of the building. Roger also made a few inquiries among the staff. He learnt that many years ago the front desk received a call from that room, and the caller asked for something to be brought up. The bellboy took it up, but didn't return. He was later found dead in the apartment's doorway, halfway in, halfway out, with a broken neck. Two different stories, both including broken necks from two different eras. Then there's yet another one, according to an article in the Truth newspaper. Although others have scoffed at the idea of a ghost, the George Hotel's general manager, Mr. Frank Sheeran, says there has been enough evidence in the past years to back up the stories. Legend has it that a few days before Christmas of 1905, a young man booked into a room and refused to take part in the pub's pre-Christmas festivities. One morning his body was found hanging in the room. The management tried to hush up the tragedy, and within a few days the room was barricaded. The room was barricaded in 1905. Perhaps it had remained that way for over 6 decades until a group of young musicians needed accommodation for 5 people. In 1971, 5 years later, the Soul Agents' visit, the George presented Art London's long-running striptease show Get Your Gear Off, and hung a banner across its Fitzroy Street portico reading, "This is the show," with visual emphasis on the first letter of each word. The star of the show was Jeanette, a single mother of 7-year-old Jason. who lived together in a cheap room at the George. She said, "While I perform, I leave Jason asleep and keep on popping upstairs to see how he is. This night, I just closed the door without locking it, leaving him fast asleep. After I finished my opening number, I checked and found the door locked. I thought Jason had got up and done it. So I left my vanity case containing personal things and makeup outside the door and went downstairs for a master key. I had left my key inside. When I returned, my case was gone, the door was open. All the lights were on and the shower was on full. Jason was still fast asleep. It was really frightening. I woke him and asked him if he had turned on the shower, but he didn't know anything. My case was found next morning on the hotel office floor. Jeanette's convinced that she and her son have been victims of the ghost. Marty Roan and the Soul Agents may have been the first paying guests to stay in the George's haunted annex for 6 decades. Is it any wonder the lone ethereal inhabitant found a way to send them the message, "Don't bother me"? A few years after Marty and the Soul Agents stay, that section of the George Hotel was closed to guests once again. According to General Manager Frank Sheeran, over the years there have been several sightings of the ghost, especially when people wandered into the section which was no longer used. In the same interview, a Mr. Frank Sheridan, a former private eye, told of a personal experience he had after breaking down a boarded up door leading to this disused section. A cloud of dust suddenly jumped in front of me, he said. The dust came straight toward me and even followed me down the stairs. And the noise, I heard thumps and bumps and a kind of whistle. It was eerie. Since that article was published, the George has undergone a total transformation. It's been completely gutted and rebuilt into a substantial set of apartments with high ceilings, Baltic floorboards and $1 million price tickets. The haunted extension has long since been demolished. There have been no further reports of ghostly non-paying guests.
What a spooky tale. And it is quite interesting because these guys were at the height of their career. They really didn't need to invent anything to make themselves bigger. I mean, they could have. It could all have been a bit of a hoax, but for so many of their friends to be brought into it, and a lot of them witnessed what happened, seems a little far-fetched that they would make it up. And also, it was at a time where it may not have been popular to state that you'd had contact with things like this, of this nature. You may be ridiculed and made fun of, as so many others were, especially alien abductions and anything that was kind of paranormal wasn't always viewed as interesting and as exciting as it is now. And Ouija, or Ouija as they say in America, from what we've learned from such movies as The Conjuring in particular, messing around with this kind of thing always seems to come with a devil or demon spirit. Now, that's not always the case in reality. Sometimes it doesn't work at all, and sometimes something may come through positively, but it's probably best to protect yourself before going and attempting anything of this nature. For centuries, it's been used as a game board of sorts, much like the tarot were used as playing cards and entertainment for guests when you had people over. And it's probably brought about some not so nice things. Now, we don't recommend you going and dabbling in such things without fully understanding what you're getting yourself into. However, if you have any interesting tales you'd like to share with us, write it down in the comments section, because we'd be very interested to know if you've ever dabbled in the Ouija or Ouija, and what was the outcome, if anything at all. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and hit that notification bell so you're aware when we're posting more Aussie ghost stories.
I'm interested in your reasons for this party, aside from the pleasant company.
Ghosts, Doctor. I think everyone wonders what they would do if they saw a ghost. And now my wife has given us all the opportunity to find out.
Amusing. Ghosts, etc., being only creations of hysteria, your party should be a success.
Well, Pritchard here promises us genuine ghosts.
7 now. Maybe more before morning.
That's cheerful.